The Young and the Restless Spoilers. It had always been clear that Claire carried shadows within her, fragments of unspoken truths that clung to her presence even when she tried to mask them with a polite smile or a calm demeanor. Genoa City had seen its fair share of secrets, but what set Claire apart was not only the fact that she was new to this world of shifting loyalties, betrayals, and family dramas, but also that she had not yet found anyone she could fully trust with the burden of what she carried. Her relationships remained tentative, her conversations guarded, and her choices weighed down by the silent knowledge that something from her past, something deeply personal, still hovered behind her eyes. No matter how hard she tried to blend into the fabric of the Newman family, there was an air of incompleteness, as though a piece of her was always hidden just out of reach, waiting for the moment when someone worthy of her trust would finally emerge. Victoria had long sensed it, the quiet hesitation in her daughter, the way Claire would sometimes pull back just when she seemed closest to opening up. A mother's instincts rarely fail, and Victoria, having lived her own life under the weight of secrets and mistakes, understood better than most how difficult it could be to reveal the truth when shame, fear, and heartbreak were tangled together. For years, Victoria had harbored her own secret, a secret born out of youthful recklessness and vulnerability. One she had carefully locked away because speaking of it meant reliving the pain of abandonment and the humiliation of being discarded by a man who had never truly seen her worth. That mistake had left scars she buried deep beneath her polished exterior, scars that returned now with startling clarity as she looked at Claire and recognized the familiar pattern of silence. When Victoria finally confronted Claire about the knees that always seemed to follow her, the truth spilled out in a way that left both women reeling. Claire confessed to something that shifted the ground beneath their feet. She had a child. It was not something she had spoken of to anyone in Genoa City, not even to those who claimed to care for her. She had made the agonizing choice to entrust the child to someone else's care, ensuring the boy would grow up safe and shielded from the turmoil of her unstable past. Yet not a day went by when she did not think of him, not a moment when she did not wonder whether she had made the right decision or whether she had betrayed him by letting him go. She remembered his face, his laugh, the warmth of his tiny hand gripping hers, and though she carried on with her life, the memory was always there like an echo. Victoria, hearing this, felt her heart seize with both fear and recognition. Fear, because the idea of her daughter carrying such a weight alone filled her with dread. Recognition, because she knew what it meant to live with a secret so heavy it bent the spine. She remembered the man who had abandoned her when she was young, the man who left her to deal with consequences he wanted no part of. She remembered the humiliation, the sense of failure, and the desperate measures she had taken to protect herself from gossip and judgment. In Claire's confession, Victoria heard the faint reverberations of her own story, and she was horrified not because of what Claire had revealed, but because she knew exactly how devastating such isolation could be. The idea of the child being out there, somewhere in the world, stirred something fierce in Victoria. She refused to let history repeat itself, not for her daughter. If Claire had found the courage to admit this truth to her, then it was Victoria's duty not only to protect her, but also to make sure that no one dared to use this knowledge as a weapon against her. Genoa City was a town where secrets rarely remained buried, and where the powerful and the cruel alike often found joy in exploiting vulnerability. Victoria swore to herself that she would not allow Claire to become a target. This was not a scandal, not something to be whispered about behind closed doors. It was a truth, and it was time to confront it openly. She declared that the boy, Claire's son, must be acknowledged, not hidden. He was family, and no one had the right to sneer or whisper otherwise. Victoria's words carried a weight that surprised even Claire, who had spent so long bracing herself for rejection, for judgment, for the inevitable condemnation that came whenever a young woman was revealed to have made choices deemed unworthy by those around her. But Victoria would not tolerate condemnation. She pointed to Cal as proof that Genoa City was no stranger to complicated family histories. Cal had his own child, and though his life had been marked by mistakes and questionable choices, no one had ever dared to suggest that his child was less deserving of love or respect. If Cal was allowed the dignity of fatherhood without shame, then why should Claire be denied the dignity of motherhood? Victoria's resolve ignited something within Claire. For so long she had convinced herself that speaking the truth would only result in more pain, more rejection, but her mother's unwavering support lit a path she had not thought possible. It was not simply about acknowledging the boy to the world, it was about reclaiming her own story, refusing to be defined by fear or silence. And yet, even as she began to feel the flicker of hope, doubts lingered. Would the rest of the Newman family accept this? Would Victor see the child as a weakness to be scrutinized, a vulnerability that could be exploited by enemies? Would Nikki, with her fierce protectiveness, embrace the boy or see him as a complication in an already complicated legacy? The questions loomed large, and the danger of exposure was real. In Genoa City, nothing stayed hidden forever. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors into scandals that could topple even the most powerful figures. Victoria knew this all too well, having watched her father's empire rise and fall on the tide of public perception. But she also knew that secrets, once revealed on her own terms, could no longer be used against them. To her, the choice was simple: bring the truth to light, stand firm, and dare anyone to cast judgment. Her determination drew a sharp contrast between herself and others who had faltered under similar circumstances. For every parent who had abandoned their child, for every family member who had concealed the existence of someone out of shame, Victoria's stance was a declaration that no one would define her daughter by the mistakes of her past. Instead, she would define her by the courage it took to endure, the strength it took to confess, and the love that still bound her to her child no matter how much time or distance separated them. And so, as Claire grappled with the decision of whether to reveal everything to the rest of Genoa City, the seeds of a new chapter were sown. This was no longer just about survival or secrecy, it was about identity, about dignity, about reclaiming the power that comes from facing the world unafraid. The stakes were higher than ever, but with Victoria by her side, Claire began to believe that perhaps she could walk through the fire and emerge not as the girl haunted by her past, but as the woman defined by her truth. The question that lingered in every heart after Claire's revelation was deceptively simple yet profoundly unsettling: where was the child now? The boy who represented not just Claire's hidden past but also her unspoken hope for the future had been entrusted to the care of another, yet the details remained frustratingly vague. Claire admitted she had arranged for him to be cared for by someone she thought trustworthy, but time had passed, circumstances had changed, and even she was no longer certain of his exact whereabouts. That uncertainty gnawed at Victoria, whose instincts screamed that no matter how carefully planned, no arrangement was truly safe from interference, especially in a world where secrets had a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment. The thought of her grandson Becky's yes, she had already accepted him as something lost, overlooked, or worse, manipulated by forces beyond their control, filled her with an urgency she could not ignore. And what unsettled her even more was the name that began to circulate in whispers: Holden. Holden had been orbiting the edges of Claire's life for weeks, a figure shrouded in shadows, never fully explaining his motives yet always appearing at just the right or wrong moment. His presence carried the weight of riddles, a man whose background was cloaked in mystery, whose decisions seemed driven by an agenda no one else could quite decipher. He was not an ordinary drifter or casual acquaintance. He moved like someone who knew more than he was willing to share, someone who thrived on keeping others unbalanced. And now, it seemed, he had knowledge of the boy. This revelation shifted everything. If Holden truly knew about Claire's son, then he held leverage, and in Genoa City, leverage was the most dangerous currency of all. He could use it to manipulate, to bargain, to destroy reputations and alliances with a single well-timed disclosure. The realization sent shivers through Victoria, who recognized the peril of a man like Holden carrying secrets about her family. Victoria's first instinct was to gather strength, to build alliances that would protect both Claire and the child. She reached out to Kyle, recognizing that his own life experiences gave him a unique perspective. Kyle had lived under the scrutiny of family legacies, had faced judgment for choices that others believed reflected poorly on the Abbott name, and had learned what it meant to balance personal identity with public expectation. When Victoria brought him into her confidence, their conversation carried a gravity that underscored the enormity of the situation. She spoke of Claire's confession, of the boy, of Holden's disturbing awareness, and Kyle listened with a mix of empathy and calculation. He understood better than most that in a town like Genoa City, family secrets were never just personal, they were weapons, vulnerabilities. and sometimes even ticking time bombs waiting to explode in the public arena. Kyle did not mince words when he told Victoria that if Holden knew, then they were already behind. The man's mysterious persona, his knack for being where he shouldn't, suggested that he wasn't merely a bystander stumbling upon information. He was deliberate. He was watching. And if he had chosen to let slip that he knew about the child, then it meant he had a plan for how to use it. Kyle urged Victoria to prepare for the fallout, to think not just about Claire's emotional well-being but also about the larger Newman name. A scandal could destabilize business, weaken alliances, and give rivals ammunition. Yet beneath all his practical advice, Kyle also made it clear that this was not simply a business problem. It was a child's life, a mother's bond, and a family's future. For once, strategy and heart aligned, the boy had to be found, protected, and embraced, before Holden or anyone else could twist his existence into a narrative of shame. For Claire, the unfolding drama was almost too much to bear. The act of admitting her truth had left her raw, exposed, and uncertain of how she would be received. But when Victoria stood by her, not with judgment but with fierce acceptance, something within Claire broke open. Tears streamed down her face, not only from the fear that Holden's knowledge represented but also from the relief of finally being seen for who she was. All her life she had worried that revealing her secret would mean rejection, that people would look at her child as a stain on her character, that whispers would reduce her identity to a mistake of the past. But Victoria had refused to let that narrative take root. She had declared that the boy was hers too, her grandson, and that no one in Genoa City would dare mock or belittle him. That validation, that unconditional acceptance, gave Claire a strength she hadn't known she possessed. And in that moment, as Kyle and Victoria spoke of strategies and future plans, Claire wept with gratitude but also with renewed determination. Her tears were not only for the pain of her past but also for the possibility of her future. For the first time since entrusting her child to another's care, she felt that she was not alone. She had her mother's support, her family's acknowledgement, and even Kyle's quiet but steady reassurance that no one had the right to shame her for being a mother. Whatever Holden's motives, whatever schemes he had in mind, Claire vowed that he would not steal her child's dignity. Nor would he rob her of the chance to reclaim the bond she had been forced to hide. Holden's shadow still loomed, mysterious and unpredictable, but the Newmans were no strangers to enemies. They had faced corporate raiders, blackmailers, and power-hungry manipulators before, and they had survived. The difference now was that the stakes were personal, deeply so, and Victoria knew that when family was threatened, the Newmans became their fiercest. This child was not just Claire's secret anymore. He was part of their bloodline, part of their legacy, and no amount of whispers or schemes would change that truth. And so, while Holden's enigmatic smirk and cryptic words hung in the air like storm clouds, Victoria silently vowed that she would track down her grandson, bring him home, and let the world know that no Newman child would ever be hidden in the shadows again.